From Degrassi to global domination, the Drake story. What if I told you that one of the biggest rappers in the world started out as a teenage actor on a Canadian soap opera? That before he was dropping chart-topping albums and breaking streaming records, he was getting shot by a classmate and ending up in a wheelchair on national television? Today, we're diving deep into the incredible transformation of Aubrey Drake Graham, a story that proves sometimes the most unexpected paths lead to extraordinary destinations. This is a story of how a kid from Toronto went from teen drama to global domination, and trust me, it's more fascinating than you might think. So grab your headphones, hit that subscribe button, and let's explore how Drake became, well, Drake. Our story begins on October 24th, 1986 in Toronto, Ontario. But Drake's story isn't just about where he was born. It's about the unique cultural mix that would later become his superpower. Picture this. A nightclub in early 1980s Toronto. The music is pumping. The lights are flashing. And on stage, there's this talented drummer from Memphis, Tennessee, named Dennis Graham. He's not just any drummer. He's actually performed with the legendary Jerry Lee Lewis. In the audience, a Canadian woman named Sandra Scher is watching. She's an English teacher and florist, and she's about to meet the man who would change her life forever. This is how Drake's parents met, in a moment that feels like it could be straight out of a movie. Dennis, the African-American musician with Southern roots, and Sandra, the Canadian Ashkenazi Jewish educator. Their love story would create the foundation for one of music's most complex and influential artists. But here's where the story takes a turn that would shape everything about Drake's future. When he was just 5 years old, his parents separated. Dennis returned to Memphis, while Sandra stayed in Toronto to raise their son. Suddenly, young Aubrey was growing up in a single-parent household, navigating two very different worlds. On one hand, he had his mother's Jewish Canadian heritage, living in Toronto's affluent Forest Hill neighborhood. On the other, he had his father's African-American Southern roots, which felt both distant and deeply meaningful. This cultural duality wasn't just part of his identity. It would later become the secret sauce that made his music so relatable to such a diverse audience. Sandra worked hard to provide for her son, but money was tight. Here's this kid attending school in one of Toronto's wealthiest neighborhoods, surrounded by privilege, but going home to a reality where his mother was struggling financially. Can you imagine the complexity of that experience? The contrast between his school life and home life was creating an emotional depth that would later pour out in his music. Fast forward to 2001. 14-year-old Aubrey is about to catch the break that would change everything. A family friend who worked in the entertainment industry heard about auditions for a new Canadian teen drama called Degrassi, The Next Generation. Now, let me paint you a picture of what Degrassi was. This wasn't your typical squeaky clean teen show. Degrassi tackled real issues: drugs, teen pregnancy, school violence, identity struggles. It was raw, it was real, and it was exactly the kind of show that would shape a generation of young people. And into this world stepped Aubrey Drake Graham as Jimmy Brooks. Jimmy wasn't just any character. He was a popular basketball star, the guy who seemed to have everything going for him. But here's what made Degrassi special. No character was safe from life's harsh realities. In one of the show's most shocking storylines, Jimmy gets shot by a classmate and becomes paralyzed from the waist down, confined to a wheelchair. Think about this for a moment. Here's a 15-year-old Drake, having portrayed one of the most traumatic experiences a person can face. He wasn't just acting. He was learning to dig deep into human emotion, to understand struggle, to convey pain and resilience. These weren't just acting lessons. They were life lessons that would later show up in every song he ever wrote. For 7 years, from 2001 to 2008, Drake appeared in 100 episodes of Degrassi. While his classmates were figuring out what they wanted to do with their lives, Drake was already living in the entertainment world. He was earning a steady paycheck, reportedly around $50,000 per year, which was huge for a teenager, especially one whose family had struggled financially. But here's the thing that's absolutely crucial to understand. Drake never saw acting as his end goal. Even while he was becoming a household name in Canada, even while he was building the successful acting career, there was something else burning inside him. Music was calling. The Jimmy Brooks character taught him about vulnerability. about showing emotion. Here's where our story gets really interesting. It's 2006, and Drake is still Jimmy Brooks by day, but by night he's becoming something entirely different. While most of his Degrassi castmates are focused on their acting careers, Drake is spending his free time in recording studios, writing lyrics, and learning the music business. His first mixtape, Room for Improvement, drops in 2006. Now, I want you to understand something. This wasn't just a hobby project. This was Drake making a statement. He was saying, I'm more than just a guy in a wheelchair on TV. I'm an artist. But the transition wasn't easy. Imagine being known by millions of people as Jimmy Brooks, then try and convince those same people to take you seriously as a rapper. The entertainment industry is brutal when it comes to typecasting. Actors who try to become musicians face enormous skepticism. Just ask Will Smith or Justin Timberlake in his early days. Except Drake was doing in reverse, and he was doing in a genre that wasn't exactly welcoming to former child actors. Room for Improvement was rough around the edges, but it showed potential. It showed that Drake understood storytelling, that he could craft narratives that drew people in. His acting background was actually an asset. He knew how to convey emotion, how to make people feel something. In 2007, he released Comeback Season, and this is where you could hear the evolution happening. His flow was getting smoother, his production was getting better, and most importantly, he was finding his voice, that unique blend of singing and rapping that would become his signature. But it was his third mixtape, So Far Gone, released in 2009, that changed everything. This wasn't just another mixtape from a former TV actor. This was a statement piece. Songs like Best I Ever Had and Successful weren't just good, they were undeniable. The production was crisp, the melodies were infectious, and Drake's performance was confident in a way that his previous work hadn't been. The response was immediate and overwhelming. So Far Gone got over 2 million downloads in its first few hours. Radio stations that had never played a Drake song were suddenly putting him in heavy rotation. Music blogs that had dismissed him as a gimmick were now calling him the future of hip-hop. But here's the most important part. Drake made the ultimate commitment to his music career. In 2007, he made a decision to leave Degrassi. He was walking away from steady money, from a guaranteed career, from the safety of a world he knew. He was betting everything on a dream that most people around him thought was unrealistic. Picture this moment. It's 2009 and Lil Wayne, one of the biggest names in hip-hop, is listening to So Far Gone. Wayne isn't just any rapper. He's a guy who discovered Nicki Minaj, who's worked with everyone from Jay-Z to Eminem. And he's hearing something in Drake's music that he can't ignore. The call comes in June 2009. Lil Wayne wants to sign Drake to Young Money Entertainment. For Drake, this isn't just a record deal. It's validation from one of the most respected artists in the industry. It's proof that his transition from acting to music wasn't just possible. It was actually happening. But let's talk about what made this moment so significant. Young Money wasn't just any label. It was home to Lil Wayne, who at the time was arguably the biggest rapper in the world. This was a label that understood how to take raw talent and turn it into global superstars. And they saw something in Drake that was worth investing in. The signing was controversial. Hip-hop purists questioned whether a former child actor could really be authentic in a genre that prized street credibility above almost everything else. There were whispers about whether Drake was real enough for hip-hop, but Wayne saw something different. He saw an artist who could expand hip-hop's reach, who could bring new audiences to the genre while respecting its roots. Working with Young Money gave Drake access to resources he'd never had before. Professional producers, major distribution, marketing budgets, and most importantly, credibility. When Lil Wayne co-signs you, the hip-hop world pays attention. The chemistry was immediate. Drake appeared on Wayne's I'm Single and absolutely killed it. His verse wasn't just good. It was memorable, quotable, and showed that he belonged in the same conversation as one of rap's biggest stars. But Drake wasn't content to just ride Wayne's coattails. He was preparing for something bigger. He was working on his debut studio album, and he knew it had to be perfect. This was his chance to prove that he wasn't just a gimmick, that he wasn't just a former actor trying to rap. This was his opportunity to show the world that he was a legitimate artist. June 15, 2010, the date that changed everything. Thank Me Later drops, and it's not just an album, it's a cultural earthquake. The album debuts at #1 on the Billboard 200, selling over 447,000 copies in its first week. But the numbers only tell part of the story. What made Thank Me Later so revolutionary was how it redefined what hip-hop could be. Drake wasn't just rapping. He was singing. He was vulnerable. He was talking about emotions that male rappers traditionally kept hidden. Songs like Find Your Love and Over showed a softer side of hip-hop that resonated with audiences who had never connected with the genre before. But here's what's really incredible. Drake didn't abandon his Toronto roots or his mixed heritage. Instead, he made them central to his identity. He rapped about growing up in Canada, about his Jewish mother, about feeling caught between different worlds. This authenticity, this willingness to be completely himself, was what made him so relatable to such a diverse audience. The success was immediate and overwhelming. Thank Me Later went platinum. The singles were dominating radio. Drake was suddenly performing at major award shows, collaborating with superstars like Rihanna and Jay-Z, and being mentioned in the same breath as the biggest names in music. But this was just the beginning. Over the next decade, Drake would release album after album that pushed boundaries and broke records. Take Care, Views, Scorpion, each one bigger than the last. He became the artist with the most Billboard Hot 100 entries in history. He broke streaming records that seemed impossible to break. And through it all, you could trace it back to those early days on Degrassi, to that young man learning to tap into emotion, to connect with audiences, to tell stories that mattered. Drake's journey from Jimmy Brooks to global superstar is more than just a success story. It's proof that the most unexpected paths can lead to extraordinary destinations. His willingness to embrace vulnerability, to blend different musical styles, to stay true to his complex identity, created a template that countless artists now follow. The boy from Toronto who started in a wheelchair on Canadian television became the man who redefined what it means to be a hip-hop artist in the 21st century. And that, my friends, is the power of never giving up on your dreams, no matter how impossible they might seem. What did you think of Drake's incredible journey? Let me know in a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories like this one. Until next time, keep chasing those dreams. You never know where they might take you.
Jail bars ain't golden gates. Those who fake, they break. When they meet their 400-pound weight, we about to rule the world. Everyone. But now the things are moving.